Okay, so I'll start off with a quick intro of the people who are going to be interviewing Justin today, and then we can introduce Justin. So I'm Annie. The people who are on Hack that are going to be interviewing Justin today are me, Michael, and Jansen and Andrew, as you can see on Zoom. I'm a junior at MIT, and if I'm correct, I think everyone else is a freshman, and right now we're all computer science students. So yeah, Justin, could you give us a quick, brief intro about your professional background and stuff like that?
Sure. What's up? So I'm Justin, and I am an internet entrepreneur and investor, and I've been doing this for 2004, so like 18 years. Started off when I was in college. I had this startup called Kiko. It was like a internet web calendar, kind of like Google Calendar. And then we got into the very first batch of Y Combinator back in 2005, which is how I got my start. Eventually, that company didn't really work, but we started another company that we ended up growing called Justin TV, and then turned into a live video site. And eventually, that pivoted to Twitch, the live streaming site, and sold that to Amazon in 2014. And then since then, I've been investing and starting different companies, and most recently, I started a company called Fractal. That's a NFT marketplace for gaming assets.
Yeah, thanks for the intro. So we have a Slido and people are just letting their questions flow in. So right now, the top question we have is, what prompted you to start Justin TV, and did you guys face any backlash or judgment for trying to start it?
Yeah, so I mean, back in 2006, we started this site, right? It was like us trying to create our own live streaming show. It started off because we had this other company, like I said, I had gone through YC, and we raised a little bit of money, and Google Calendar had come out in the intervening time, which is like the same product, but is much better in pretty much every way. And so we were like, what should we do with our product? And we kept having these different discussions about how to pivot it or what we could do. And eventually we decided to try to sell it on eBay, which we ended up doing. But during that process, we were kind of having all these conversations, me and my co-founder, HackMIT, and we ended up thinking, wow, this is like really interesting. It should be a podcast or something. Like there weren't really podcasts back then, but we thought we were super smart because we were 23. And so we were like, we should have a podcast about our ideas. And then we're like, well, we don't really know when we're gonna have, we live together, we're like always talking. So we're like, we don't really know when we're gonna have interesting ideas. So we should make it like a 24-hour stream, like audio feed. And then we were like, well, we should do video. So then it became a 24-hour live video feed, which just sounds silly in retrospect, but that was like our actual logic. And so then we didn't know. I mean, we were like, okay, we have to figure out how to do this technically, but both of us were engineers, so we kind of ended up figuring out how to, this before the iPhone, or there was like Instagram or YouTube Live, or enough bandwidth from mobile to really support this. So we kind of hacked together this kind of hardware device to let you stream multiplex video over a bunch of different cell phone data network connections. And then we launched it as a show. That was the idea. I guess, the show wasn't very interesting because it was like a bunch of programmers who had no experience making content. And there wasn't like that was much amateur content. Like there wasn't social media yet, it was 2006. It was like right when social media was getting started. But I think, so a lot of people were like, why do you want to do this? Is so like, it's kind of weird. I did get some pushback from people who thought it was like super narcissistic, or it wasn't like people weren't creating content that really showed their lives. Today, I think the spiritual successor to it is kind of like Instagram or Snapchat stories, which is content for people's lives. But, you're just putting, like a few things out a day, like 60 seconds of content maybe. And, someone's entire day might be compressed down into like a very small amount of content. And I think that's the part that we didn't do right. We were like streaming 1 minute per minute, and most of the time it was like super boring.
Yeah, for sure. It sounds like you guys face a lot of pivots, both on the idea, the tech, and also challenges on like motivation and the social aspect. So what do you think were some of the largest challenges that you guys faced while working on Twitch? And if you could relive the experience, what do you think you would do differently?
Well, I would probably do almost everything differently because we were not very good founders at the time. When we started off with Twitch, it was the four of us, myself and my co-founders, HackMIT, Kyle, and Michael, who have all gone on to be quite successful in, post fact. Like HackMIT's still the CEO of Twitch, so a multi-thousand person company now, obviously a huge internet company. Kyle, our other co-founder, ended up going to start this company called Cruise, a self-driving car company with my brother, and it's also a huge company. And Michael's the CEO and co-founder, or sorry, it's just the CEO of Y Combinator, or the managing director, I think his title is, of the early stage program. So, they're all doing big things. But at the time, we were like very incompetent and like didn't know anything. So we made all the mistakes, I guess. We weren't very focused on a specific customer need or customer segment. We didn't talk to our customers nearly enough. Once we pivoted to Twitch, we weren't very good at raising funds, and so I think we could do that much better and kind of differently. And once we pivoted to Twitch, we were pretty bad at managing people in general, and kind of like setting goals. And then we probably sold it too early, like in retrospect. So there was a lot that we did wrong. What was the first part of the question? I forgot. I think I answered just the second part.
Yeah, I guess like if you could name one of the biggest challenges of Twitch, what would that have been?
I mean, I think the biggest challenge was that it was really hard to get people to believe that was going to be a thing. Even internally when we were pivoting to it, there was very mixed decision among all the people inside the company, including the co-founders. But then raising funding was really hard because, investors weren't really the target customers. And so they didn't really get it, They didn't get that it was going to be a thing. They didn't really believe that it would, people would watch other people play video games. I think they didn't really understand. And so that was actually quite hard to like get people to fund it, which is, I think, part of the reason why we ultimately sold, is like, it was just hard to raise capital for. But there were lots of other problems. I mean, yeah, there were tons, all the ones I talked about.
Okay, speaking of other problems, one question that I'm like also personally interested in is, obviously like Twitch started off like pretty small. So I was wondering, like, at what point did you guys have to like worry about things like content, like copyright, stuff like that, like people not playing copyrighted music? Like, at what size did that like start becoming a problem for you guys, where you had to like crack down on like these policies and what people could stream and what people couldn't?
Well, we had already, been around for 5 years before we started pivoting to Twitch. So we already had this live streaming site, and people would always stream copywritten content. And so we were DMCA compliant. So we allowed content holders to inform us about, copyright violations, things that people were streaming, things that were there that they own the copyright to, and then take that content down. So, we've been thinking about it for a while, and like built tools for them to do that for a while. So, we kind of already knew about the DMCA and were like compliant with it. Eventually with Twitch, it got a little different because like over time, people started caring about, like the label started caring about live streaming of music. And so we had to build tools around that. But, it's something that we were kind of aware of the whole time. If you're building a social service in the US, where it allows user generated content, you need to be aware of the DMCA, because that's your protection against, getting sued by copyright holder.
Given that, the startup process had so many problems and learning experiences for you guys, and this is kind of an adaptation of a popular question as well, what do you think was the defining trait or traits that made you guys still succeed in the end?
I think, it was probably persistence and, kind of a lack of options. when you're young and you don't like really have any good options, we were just like so dedicated to being successful in some way, right? Like making it. And so that was probably our biggest, that was the thing that helped carry it more than anything. I don't necessarily think we made that great decisions. We didn't have that good focus. We weren't the best programmers, but we just like had a lot of heart. And then I think after that, it was probably that we did feel like we could kind of build anything and like have a pretty good, practical ability to like build stuff and test stuff out.
So it seems like you have success in starting startups in the past. So what keeps you motivated to continue starting new companies and growing them?
Yeah, so I started a lot of companies. Probably, I think I counted them recently, maybe like over 10, and not all of them have been successful. In fact, most of them have been kind of like, if not like abject failures, like just kind of whatever. But for me, like starting companies is a way to learn about a new industry, and it's exciting. I love learning. I'm very curious about the world, and so I like starting companies because it's a way to learn about a new industry or a new space or a new product. So it's a vehicle. I keep my brain plastic.
And is there any advice that you would give to aspiring student entrepreneurs?
Well, you just have to get started. That's the first part, right? That's the hardest step, is usually the first step in getting like a little bit of momentum, because there's a lot of, there's always reasons why you shouldn't do something or something's not going to work. So you kind of just got to get started building something, and then you're going to figure it out over time. And, I think with entrepreneurship, especially, it's kind of like, usually the downsides aren't as bad as you think. And like, they don't, even if it's not successful, you're going to get a lot of value from learning. It's usually better just to dive in, even if you don't really know what you're doing. I mean, there's so many examples of people who don't know what they're doing becoming successful. Like pretty much all of the people I know who started companies, when they started off, they had no idea. They made, tons of mistakes. Look at like Dylan from Figma. He started his company when he was 18 or something. He like took 5, years to launch a product, right? Like 4+ years to actually like launch their product. Notoriously, learned about me. He had never had a job. He was like an intern before, right? So like he learned management on the fly. It was like, I think it was really tough. And then sold his company for $20 billion. So you can figure it out. If you can do it, you can do it.
Okay, and then one other popular question we got is just like, what are your general thoughts on like crypto as like a thing that's here to stay? Like, do you see NFTs as being like the future thing that's like gonna impact our lives? Like before, like obviously like live streaming wasn't really a part of our lives before, things like Twitch and YouTube and stuff like that. Do you see NFTs as something of that nature, like something that's here to stay, but just isn't like super, super popular right now?
Yeah, I think NFTs are certainly here to stay. I think the idea of digital ownership and digital scarcity is something that is here to stay. And people will say it's like, a lot of people are like, oh, that's stupid because, the marginal cost of creating more digital stuff is really low or whatever. But human beings naturally want ways to differentiate themselves, and scarce resources or scarce digital, real physical scarcity, and then digital scarcity is like a way to do that, right? So I think what will happen is we'll move more towards games and metaverses that have some sort of open economy inside of them, or digital spaces, that have open economies inside of them, and where players and businesses, third-party businesses, are kind of interacting and around this stuff. And so, and then NFTs are one way to, kind of track the ownership and of all of this stuff. It's kind of like Ready Player One. I'm like very inspired by that movie, where all the people in the movie, people are playing like they're in this virtual world, and everybody playing in the or like playing the game, that treats like the currency in the game and all the stuff in it is like, it's like real stuff. I think that's gonna happen in the world. It's already kind of happening. People spend tens of billions of dollars on Counter-Strike and Fortnite skins and other games already. So the idea of putting this stuff on a blockchain kind of is a obvious next step, in my opinion.
Back on the topics of startups, another popular question is, since you have so much experience in startups and you're an investor yourself, what do you generally look for in the companies that you invest in?
I look for founders who have a lot of heart, and they've got some reason to be doing that, what they're doing. They're not going to give up, and then outside of that, it's like, am I interested in this idea? But I think there's like some nugget of like a really big idea here and some, tailwind or like change in the world that's going to enable it and empower it. So those are kind of some of the things that I think are most important.
So when you have your mindset on a really good idea, how do you know when to pivot and when to push through if you're encountered a challenge?
Yeah, I think it's hard. It's not really a formula, right? In terms of like when you pivot, when you persist. I think generally what happens is people pivot when they're out of ideas of how to make something work or grow. And so they're discouraged. I don't know if there's like it kind of just happens based on whether people feel like they have ideas to keep going or not, or whether they're demotivated and they want to do something different. I don't know that there's like, there's kind of examples at all times of people who like persisted just a little bit longer and then they figure it out, but there's like massive survivorship bias in those examples.
Okay. Another question we have for you is, what's it like being like a content creator now? So we saw that like you started a YouTube channel recently. So like what has that been like as your channel has grown and things like that? Have you like had to deal with like angry commenters, things like that? How's it been?
It's been good. I made a YouTube channel as a friend of mine kind of convinced me. She was like, oh, you should have a YouTube. I was doing this podcast and she was like, you should make a YouTube video or a YouTube channel instead. I was kind of like, I don't know, shooting video is pretty intimidating. It seems like a lot of work. And so she was like, I'll edit it and do all the work. All you have to do is buy a camera and shoot the video. And so I was doing that, and I started doing that. It was, it's pretty fun, actually. People got a lot of positive feedback off the first couple of videos. And so now I'm just, kind of make it for fun. People say I get a lot of positive feedback. Someone this weekend was like, oh, I came to Silicon Valley because you like, of your videos, like they want to work in tech because my videos, or someone else was like applied to Y Combinator because of my videos and they were the most recent batch. So stuff like that is pretty cool to hear. And feels, like it's like a way of giving back. So yeah, it's good. I don't feel like I deal with many angry comments. Like one, I don't really read the comments. I got better things to do. So that's part of it. But I hear, when I have read the comments or my, producer of my videos, and other people tell me my comments are very positive. I mean, I think my content is really quite positive. It's not like, for the most part, I'm not really, like doing things that people would complain about, I don't think.
Sounds like another key aspect of your success in startups and also in Twitch seems like the team. So, you talked a little bit about persistence and how, all the co-founders are really tight knit and just soldiered it out. So like, how did you go about meeting those people, and, how do you suggest we go about forming teams when we want to start startups or build a product?
Yeah. So I only start companies with other people. Because I don't know, just for me, I think the energy of doing something with someone else is really powerful. And then now, like, I don't want to be the CEO of any company. So I need to find someone else that I'm going to partner with, who's really more product focused. So, really start with other people, and like that's a way that I get energized around stuff. So I'm often just throwing out ideas of things that I'm interested in and like talking to people about them. And then I kind of see who's also interested and it resonates with. And oftentimes those people become co-founders of the companies, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I often start companies with for the most part, I do start companies with new people, so that I haven't worked with before. And so that's kind of high risk, sometimes, it's obviously worked out for me in several cases, like quite well, but other times it hasn't. And so, that's one way to do it. I don't know if it's the right way, but like for you, if I was a college student, like my first co-founders were people I went to school with, and it was kind of the same thing. I was just talking about companies, and these are the people who are around, who are interested in starting a company. So that's kind of how I went about it. But the good news for you is like the people that are around you don't have like a very high opportunity cost, so they're available to start companies.
So it seems like you like starting with new people and also going to learn about new fields. So is there a reason you hop to different fields rather than sticking with one field?
Well, like I said, I think it's, for me, starting companies is a way to fulfill my curiosity, right? And I like learning about new things. I'm like very interested in new. So I don't necessarily think this is like the highest expected value way to like generate wealth. Like many people I know who have made the most either started one company, that company, they stuck with that company, became like super successful, or they, started one company in fintech, and then they were like figured it out, and then they sold that one maybe, and they started another company in fintech, and then that became like really big. So I do think sometimes it pays to like stay in the same space, or just like figure out a formula and crank the same formula, right? I don't know. For me, I like new stuff though, so I like it's a exercise in creativity, for me.
So obviously, when you're trying new things, you're taking big risks. So how do you deal with failure or the possibility of failure?
Well, before I was, it was very unhealthy. I was very afraid of failure, and it was just like I didn't want to fail no matter what. I think today, and the funny thing is like that kind of extended even after I sold Twitch. It wasn't just like becoming successful that made it like take the pressure off. It was actually more of an internal mindset shift where I kind of realized like, number one, I don't have complete control over the outcome. I have like some control over some of the inputs, like how much work I do or like how smart decisions I make. But there's a lot of outcomes, like is the market there? Is it the right time, right time in the market? Like, does this particular product land well with customers? Like there's a lot of things that don't, you aren't really under your control as much. And so for me, realizing that was, one big part of it. And then just kind of realizing that like all of these things that I was wound up with like being successful are, really not going to provide lasting satisfaction. It's more and more about the process and like, am I doing things that I enjoy every day? Those were some things that helped me let go of like the fear of failure, and I think that was an important process for me.
So another question we had is, what do you think are like the big differences in your mindset when you're an entrepreneur, like versus an investor? Now that you've been on both sides, like, do you think being an entrepreneur has made you a better investor and like vice versa?
Well, yeah, I mean, being an entrepreneur is a lot different from being an investor, right? As an entrepreneur, you're like doing one thing for the most part, at least, until you're kind of at my stage where I can kind of work on a couple of things with like different teams or something. But like for the most part, as an entrepreneur, you're doing one thing, and it's kind of like do or die on that one thing. So you have all this, you're really wound up with this one thing, and you have control over it. So it feels like, there's a lot you can be doing. There's always more you can be doing, right? It can be very all consuming. Whereas as an investor, number one, you don't have any control. So at the end of the day, it's not really up to you. You make these bets and then you see what happens. At least as a venture investor, you only have like illusions of control maybe. And then the second thing is you don't actually, you don't have all your eggs in one basket. So it's kind of a portfolio. It's not like any one thing can fail and you'd be okay. So it's just way easier to be an investor. It has helped me to be an entrepreneur has helped me a lot with being an investor because, it's helped me build a brand of like, people want people who can help them, and they think, oh, the guy's created successful companies before, so he can help me. So that's a reason to take my money. But then on top of that, it's also help me empathize with entrepreneurs because I know what it's like. And I think by talking to entrepreneurs about what the journey is like, it's much more relatable to them. And so that's another selling point on like, here's why you should take my money,
And we've talked a bit about cryptocurrencies and NFTs, but in general, what are the technologies right now that you are most excited about, including and excluding cryptocurrency?
I mean, I think these like neural nets that do like amazing creative generative work, like Stable Diffusion, it's pretty awesome. I think that's one space where I think there'll be a lot of innovation and people can, I think the world of kind of creative tools will change with these innovations, and as well as like the world of like creating stuff. Like TikTok was like a big innovation, right? Not just on the content consumption side, like it made algorithmic content consumption like kind of was the first example, and then that propagated to like Instagram and Twitter and everywhere else. But it's also really good at the tool. They built a bunch of tools to make it easy for people to like create short form videos, that were like compelling enough, or very compelling actually, not to shit on TikTok. Like, and so I think there will be this whole new wave of content that, it'll be even more easy for people to create their ideas and breathe life into their ideas, because instead of like if you have an idea for a little animated short, as a just normal person who has like no video creation experience, like you'll just be able to describe like, I want an animated movie with two cats telling each other this joke, and then kind of like it'll appear, right? And you can kind of tweak it and you've made content. Whereas like right now, if I wanted to make an animated movie, I'd like have no idea how to do it, right? Or maybe I'd have to hire someone on Fiverr or something like that. So I think that's an area that's super interesting.
Another question we have is back to your YouTube channel is, what was the favorite YouTube video that you've made?
My favorite YouTube video I've made is I did this 5-day fast, maybe it was almost 2 years ago, or maybe it was a year and a half ago, maybe. I don't remember, to be honest. And I think it was like hilarious. The video I think was like hilarious and just like basically dying. So like it's fun to make. I mean, it wasn't really fun at the time, but it was, I think it was kind of funny. So I definitely recommend everyone should try to an extended fast just to see what it does to them.
I also know that you co-founded a product called Fractal. So can you talk a bit more about what that is?
Sure. Fractal's a NFT marketplace for people to discover, buy, and sell gaming NFTs. And we also create a lot of tooling for game companies, Web3 game companies, to build blockchain games. And it's a pretty new company. We started just under a year ago. It's raised about $35 million in funding, and it's a really small team, like 18 people right now, just building stuff, kind of like in that crypto bear market mode where you just you're just building to kind of build for where you think the market is going to go, and that's kind of what we're doing right now. Actually, to be honest, it's the most fun time.
So how'd you come up with ideas like Fractal? Like, what's your general idea generation process?
Yeah, so that it's either about the idea or the people, right? So like with an idea like Fractal, I'm like, what happened was I was thinking about crypto ideas. I was interested in crypto first as an investor, and then as I saw some friends of mine build projects on crypto projects, and I was like, okay, this is pretty interesting. It's an interesting way to mobilize a community. And so I started brainstorming and ended up connecting with an old friend of mine who was at Google. He had been the co-founder of Google Drive internally at Google. And so he and I were just like, he was also red pilled in crypto. And so the two of us were just kind of brainstorming ideas. And he was like, we should do something in NFTs, particularly on the Solana blockchain, because he thought NFTs were going to grow. He thought there were a lot of tailwinds. And then he was like, well, we were talking about how potential utility for NFTs. And to me, it was very obvious, like there's like already a class of virtual goods that have huge utility, right? Which is in-game items and game stuff, right? Stuff in games. And so making, that to me, it was like, oh, let's create a marketplace for this stuff. And that is what was the seed for the idea of fractals. So, for me, the idea generation process is just like really about having conversations with people I might want to work with about potential ideas, or I have an idea and then I start talking to people about it and then figuring out who is someone I could partner with to build this with.
And I guess along the same vein, how do you know if a person is the one to start a company with?
Well, I've been wrong before and right before, because I've had co-founders that haven't worked out with me, and then that I've really loved working with. And so, I think it's really about, do you guys have aligned values? Number one, it's like, are you're trying to achieve the same things? I think if you have misaligned values, it's like pretty hard to reconcile that, right? Because values aren't like, they're not right or wrong. They're just different. And so, but it can cause a lot of friction if you have like different values. It's the same way if you're getting married to someone or like in a long-term relationship, like if you have really different values, it's going to be a problem for you. And you can't really win the argument or make them change through logic, So I think values is really important. And then obviously number two is like, you have to have complementary skill sets to be able to, each bring something to the table, So I think that's pretty important as well. So, I guess my recommendation is like, you should try working with these people before you like jump into bed and start a company together.
So on the note of fractal, so what do you see as like one of the main reasons why like a game developer should like adopt a system like fractal, where they turn in-game items into NFT, as opposed to like, I'd say like the current system where like Riot Games or someone, like they keep all their skins or something on like their centralized server and they dole them out to users?
Yeah, so I think the point of, NFTs are just a mechanism like that to make open economies. I think the more important part than, with the future of gaming is that, in my belief, is that games will become, some set of games will have open economies where, players feel like they own the stuff that they get in the game, and then they can trade it freely with each other. Like right now, these games are all closed economies where, for the most part, you just trade directly. The only transactions you can do are with this like central authority, right? The people who make the game. I think by creating open economies where you can transact with other parties, and other people can build applications and businesses that like interoperate with these like digital goods and assets, what you're going to do is like the economies will become much more robust. Like there will be like just much more economic activity, and more people want to hold this stuff because they can do more things with it, right? Like you can imagine like if there's just one game and then they make the gaming experience for this stuff, like all these skins, and then all these players have the skin. When people get bored of that one game, then they like economic activity that these people they leave the economy, right? Whereas if you can imagine if there was one game that created a bunch of skins, but then other game developers created other games and experiences that interacted with this one set of skins, then it will be much more durable as an economic system, because you'd have like, even if if you got bored of game A, you would like continue maybe playing game B or game C, or like you might even think, oh, there's going to be other experiences, so I should like keep holding on to this stuff, right? And I think that's, so that to me is like, these open economies will be much more interesting and durable. And so I think some companies will want to make their games into open economies and putting this stuff as, you could do that in a bunch of different ways. Like number one, is you could just have an API that allowed people to like, that allowed people to transact or like trade this stuff, or it was like a ledger, right? It exposed a ledger of like who owned what game assets. But the problem is like, people don't really trust centralized companies anymore as much, as they did before. But there's a lot of examples of them like, kicking you out, locking you out of your account, or like, whether it's like PayPal or Facebook or anything like that, they just decide something. Again, there'd be a lot of arbitrary rule changes, right? And so I think it's hard for third-party developers and players to like want to get behind a like open ecosystem. And I think by making all this stuff NFTs, it's like more of a signal than anything else that you're committed to creating an open ecosystem out of your stuff. I think that's why it's that's what's kind of important about it.
Those who are less familiar with crypto but still want to get into the startup space, how did you get involved with crypto, and how would you recommend people go about learning about it?
Yeah, like for me, I just I just started by learning. I mean, just learning about it online, right? It's like the same thing as everyone else, just maybe buying some of these assets and creating wallets and fucking around. Like there's nothing. I mean, it's all out there, right? It's like learning how to program anything. You just gotta kind of Google it and just figure it out. Yeah, I don't think there's anyone can figure it out. It's not that hard.
So in addition to learning about crypto, what else do you do for fun?
Well, for fun, I'm mostly into like Burning Man, actually, which is this festival out in the desert in Nevada, every like a couple hours north of Reno, at the end of every August, which is amazing creative, kind of arts and music. They call it like an experimental city in the desert, but like people go out there and then just like bring amazing art, and there's music, and it's just like a really different context or lens through which to see the world. And so, yeah, like we're working on this art project for the playa for Burning Man called Titanic's End, which is like a 70-foot long iceberg, and you can check it out online. It's on Instagram, Titanic's End. Yeah, that's pretty much my only hobby, to be honest.
And
I guess
when you're
aside
not
from
at
making
Burning
YouTube
Man,
videos.
oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, and when you're not at Burning Man, what does a day in your life look like? And how do you respond to emails so fast?
How do I respond to? I don't know that I do respond to email very fast, but if I do respond fast, it's because you caught me looking at it. But I'll go days without like looking at my email, to be honest. What's every day is kind of different. I just try to like do the thing that I enjoy to do during the day. And so sometimes it's working on my companies, and sometimes it's spending time with family. And luckily I'm having a position where I can kind of I have a lot of flexibility. I try to work out every day. And meditate in the mornings.
Okay, another fun question is, as someone who's trying to grow out their hair, when did you decide to start growing yours out? And like, what's your hair care routine?
I started in 2019, the beginning of 2019. So I guess that was 3.5 years ago. And, I think what's interesting is for guys, right? Like you don't really know about having long hair, which is there's a lot of hair care. Like you got to condition it, right? And you don't necessarily wash your hair every day, right? Like there's just stuff you don't know as a guy who's like growing. And most guys, I would say, probably grow out their hair. If they grow it out, it's like they do it when they're an adult, right? Whereas when you're a woman, you're doing it when you're younger, right? So you like have some, like your mom or older sister or something. There's probably like more people who are teaching what to do. So I actually think there's like a space in the market to have like a hair care brand for like long hair, like guys who are growing out their hair because they have like no idea what to do. And usually when there's some sort of change that's like a change in someone's consumer behavior, right? So you have that option, like you can displace, like, they're probably using like Head and Shoulders or some like generic shampoo. And there's this opportunity to kind of like displace that product. So yeah, I don't know, but my hair care routine specifically is like, I kind of tried a lot of different products, but I have like a hair thinning shampoo because I'm old, so my hair is thinning precipitously at the widow's peak. And then that has like a DHT blocker in it. And then what else? I have like Subaki. I don't know if it's like a hair like a conditioner, like a mask. That's the one that I like the most. And then like I forgot the brand, like a hair oil. Yeah. Once I found the products that worked for me, it was like, that's the best. It'll never change. Now they got me for life.
Yeah, I relate to that. I also had to try a lot of products to find something to stop my hair from frizzing everywhere.
Yeah.
Let's see. Another question. Oh, what's your favorite Twitch emote?
My favorite Twitch emote, I mean, is Kappa, of course. So it was like Kappa, Josh was an engineer who worked at Justin TV. And then when we were pivoting from Justin TV to Twitch, so before, like, what happened was in the beginning, we put all of our faces into the chat as emails, like when we were doing our own show, and then they kind of stuck around when we opened it as a platform. And then after like employee number 7 or 8, we like never put anyone else in, right? We kind of forgot about it. And then Josh was like maintaining the chat. He was like the engineer in charge of the chat. So he discovered this Easter egg and he put his own face in, but everybody else's was like a little bit longer of a hot, of keywords. And then he put his in his cap, like really short, right? His Kappa. And then, later the community discovered it and started using it as this kind of troll face. And it just like spread from there. But I love that he did it totally without our permission, and just like he just did it, and then it became this like part of internet culture.
I guess another question, what's like the weirdest thing you've had to explain to an investor? Like the weirdest idea, like the thing that was like hardest, I guess.
Well, I mean, I think that Twitch is like a pretty difficult idea to explain to investors, but maybe Justin TV was like the one that was the dumbest, like I mean, looking back, I can't believe that certain people invested in us, like we had like Paul Booth, like the founder of Gmail, like talk, invested in us. And years later, I asked him, I was like, why did this was like such a bad pitch and like such a dumb idea? And he was like, well, you guys just seem smart and we probably figure it out, which is true, right? That we made like 100x his money. So I'm like, yeah, we did figure it out.
I guess as like a very early stage startup, and like you started when you were very young too, how would you weigh technical skills versus management skills in the very beginning? Or like when you started your first startup, how much technical or coding background did you actually have?
I mean, I had like barely any. I mean, I had experience. I was kind of like an amateur hobbyist programmer, but I learned from my co-founder, Emmett, who was like, he had taken CS at Yale, but we didn't have any like real world experience. I mean, he had done like an internship at Microsoft, but we had like basically no actual experience building anything for production. And so it was all learning on the fly, which I think you can do now. I mean, as now more than ever in history, there's more like internet infrastructure to support you, like building an app, really easily. In fact, a lot of these things, ideas you could probably build like completely with like no code tools, but it's just so much easier to build a web app now. There's really no excuse.
So another interesting question we got is, how did you like find the connections you needed to like be successful in entrepreneurship? Like, I guess like in the Valley, like how did you like find the people that you needed to like invest in Twitch, or just like useful partners and things like that? Like, how did you like search for people?
Well, I think that having a network of other entrepreneurs is really important. So we had a bunch of friends through YC, and YC I think is a great tool to like get that network if you haven't never been in Silicon Valley before. But we had a bunch of friends through YC, and we asked them when we were raising money or whatever, we'd ask them like, oh, who should we, is there anyone we should talk to? And we just kind of built, like, we would rely on each other for, talk about scaling issues and how to scale a website and stuff like that. Like that kind of network really came in handy for us. And I think YC was, kind of one way to do it. If you go to work after college at Meta or Google or something like that, then, that's another way that we might build a network. But, having that as professional contacts can be really important. And if you want to figure out how to plug into an existing network, if you can.
Okay, so now we have some questions about like hackathons in general. So we'll start off with the easy one. Like, have you ever been to a hackathon?
Yes.
Like, where was your first one? Like, where'd you compete?
Oh, have I don't think I've competed in a hackathon.
Oh, okay.
I've just judged them, or like I threw one at YC years ago.
Oh, okay. So at HackMIT, we're giving, students 24 hours to like build something out that they want. Like, what's some advice that you have for them?
You better build something cool, I mean, I guess like I would focus, I don't know what the judging criteria are, but I think having a demo that really convey, like I would worry less about like all the surrounding polish of something and getting it like super robust versus like just having something that really demonstrates like the power of an idea. To me, that's like the most important. Like, for example, we had like when we got into Y Combinator, we had this demo of an Outlook style calendar that you could drag and drop, right? It's like, it was very much a piece of shit, but it was only my calendar. Like there were no accounts, right? Like it was just my calendar, but like we got in because it was, and it would break if it like wasn't very robust, but it was like demonstrated the idea and that was possible. And I think that was much more, that was pretty powerful at the time. I mean, now you could probably make that in like, one day.
In recent news, the metaverse has been a big thing. So what are your thoughts on it and how NFTs could be used in that space?
Well, I guess like, I think NFTs will be used for all the same things that kind of virtual goods are used for right now, but I'm actually more curious for like new ideas of like how, like new innovative ideas. I actually don't think I have like super good ideas for how they'll be used. I think, one example is like a lot of people are making NFTs that have some sort of like, rev share or stake that they get for, like for example, they'll make the a different land inside this virtual universe in NFT. And then if people like build businesses on this land, or like if it's a game, like if people like compete in this arena that's owned by someone else, and the owner will like can get a stake in, or get like a rake off of these matches or something like that. And I think that's really interesting, is like making NFTs part of like a big virtual economy, and allowing players to kind of play roles in between, purely a player and a like the game developer. I think is like, that's pretty fascinating.
Okay, so on like the topic of like Web3 hackathons, like what's the most interesting Web3 idea that you've seen that's like obviously like that's not fractal or something?
Well, I mean, there's these like lending markets, or like people who are doing like NFT lending. I think that's like pretty interesting lending protocols. I don't know, that's one of them. Hell.
Let's see. Okay, also related to the metaverse, were you surprised by like the whole pivot from like Facebook to Meta, or did you like kind of like see it coming, like, oh, like Facebook is kind of dying, they need to do something like?
I guess I was surprised. I don't know that I saw that coming. I mean, it's like they are, they're constantly reinventing themselves, right? So I do think Mark has been like really good at that, and seeing the future. I think it's, I don't know that they have like the killer product yet. So on the metaverse side, yeah, I don't think like VR is like that killer product. Like I don't think people want to spend most of their time in VR. Period.
Okay, let's see. Another question is, do you think there's like a big next step for like video streaming in the future, or like is it like kind of where it's going to be like for a while now?
I mean, I think shopping like people selling each other shit over videos is going to be a big thing. You know, there's like sites like Whatnot that are allowing you to do that now, but I think there'll be more, you know. It's like a massive amount of Chinese e-commerce is done by live video now. And it kind of makes sense. Like people buy stuff from other people. So, you know, like I think that will come to the US.
Yeah, that's kind of a throwback to like those old TV channels where they'd sell you stuff and ask you to call in and buy it.
Yeah.
$20
Exactly.
free shipping and handling.
Right now, you know, crypto and digitizing, you know, currency and a lot of other things is still kind of a novel idea that a lot of people are nervous about. So when or what do you think will convince the general public that this is a good idea? Or what makes you so convinced that it is?
Well, I mean, I think open economies and games are a good idea that are gonna it's gonna work, you know. So crypto is a path to do that, in my opinion. And I also think like open and decentralized ownership and decision making of you know the infrastructure of the internet makes sense. And so I guess that's what convinces me. And then when are people going to accept it? I think, you know, the mainstream will. I think like the crypto products themselves need to have like they actually have to be products that people want to use, right? That solve like a real use case for people. So Bitcoin's a good example where, you know, kind of this decentralized money that is, you know, not confiscatable, that, you know, you can take with you anywhere, that's easily transportable or transferable, is like that's something that's really valuable to people, right? And so that's why people, that's kind of like the fundamental case for Bitcoin. I think you know, for NFT, like there have to be those use cases for other crypto use. You know, there has to be those uses for other crypto use cases where people like see value in it. And so for Web3 games, like there have to be fun games, right? Like I think this, like things like you know, certain games that have been out already that weren't that fun, that people were just playing for money, like those weren't durable. I think what will make this space work is like games that are really fun first, and then that incidentally are crypto games. I mean, there's an open economy and like durable ownership inside of them. And, you know, it's kind of, but it's more of an afterthought for most players, you know.
And then again, on the topic of convincing people about stuff, how do you get good at convincing investors to give you money?
I mean, you just have to be compelling at, you know, tell a compelling story, right? So it's all about being able to tell a story of like, that's convincing of like why the world is going to be different, and then like how you're going to help facilitate that. And it's the same when you're pitching someone to join your company or pitching a customer to buy your product. It's all the same skill, which is just like you're able to convince them through like an amazing storytelling that the world is going to be different in some way and they want to be part of that.
Last question, maybe. Given, you know, recent events and the economic downturn and possible recession, how do you think this is going to impact startups or investment or innovation in general? Or do you think, you know, it's a good time or a bad time?
Well, investment is definitely down. I think it's a good time to start a company. I mean, people keep saying like great companies get started in recessions. I think that's true. I think constraints breed creativity. So having more money isn't necessarily good for more, you know, for companies, because the marginal utility or the, you know, the ROI on the marginal dollar spent is like often lower in startups as you know, get more money, right? Like when you have only very little bit of money, like you're really focused on building like maybe the most important features that customers want. But when you have a lot of money, then you're like, oh, well, I should hire VP marketing. And then that person's like, oh, we should put up billboards because, you know, I have to like do something to justify my job. And then you just spend a lot of money. So in general, I think it's, you know, it's sometimes it's really much better to be cash constrained. So it makes you more disciplined. So, you know, that's kind of what I think it's a great time to start a company. But it's also going to be difficult in that there's a lot more of a burden on you to, you know, the bar is raised, right? You got to like figure out how to be profitable and to like grow and do it with like very little money, you know. So it's harder, but that, you know, the strong will survive, and they'll make great companies.
Okay, yeah, we have one more question actually. So what are your thoughts on like the live streaming wars? Like all these companies like paying out like millions of dollars to get Twitch streamers onto their platform. Like, for example, we have like YouTube. I mean, there used to be Mixer, before like they died. Yeah, so like what are your thoughts on that? Like people just paying like millions and millions of dollars to like get people onto their platform.
I mean, I don't think it's super durable. Like it's not like the thing is Twitch has a network effect, right? You could see that because when Ninja got went to Mixer, he lost like 90% of his traffic. So like the viewers don't follow it. Like people, Twitch kind of crossed the chasm from like, people would go there for a specific streamer to like people go to Twitch to just watch some content like that's in a certain vein that they know, and then they like go and see whoever's there, right? And so, what that means is like it's buying streamers away in a temporary way, doesn't is not a super good ROI because those people are gonna like, they're not bringing their traffic with them necessarily, right? So I mean, it's good for these streamers who get a payout, but at the end of the day, I think Twitch has a really strong network effect, and it's pretty hard to break. YouTube might be the exception because they also have a huge network effect. So, with static video, maybe they can cross that over to live, but like, it actually has worked surprisingly badly in my opinion thus far. So I don't know. I guess we'll see.
And did you have a mentor or someone that you learned from? And have you ever thought about being a mentor yourself?
Well, I mean, I have had different mentors in the past, many different ones, depending on the time and, like, where I was in my career. Paul Graham, for example, founder of Y Combinator, was like a mentor when we were starting off. And, I've been a mentor many times myself in terms of, to the people around me or companies that I've invested in or co-founded, my co-founders of, newer co-founders. So, it's just, I guess, part of life, you mentor the people around you.
Okay, yeah. So I think that was everything we had today. Like, thank you so much for coming on,
All
Justin.
right.
It was really
Amazing.
good talking with you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
And best of luck with the hackathon, guys. I'll see you guys later.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, ending the stream.